Carl Evers III pays a lot of attention to three things right now: nuts, several kinds, water, and wine grapes. They all deserve his attention in California. Some of the above are doing pretty well, others not so much yet. Hi, I'm Dave Price. Carl is the president of property management and director of sustainability for AgIVs Capital, the private equity and investment management firm that specializes in agricultural assets. We first talked with Carl back in September 2024. Almonds, walnuts, pistachios, wine grapes, they all had some question marks back then. Some of those questions have been answered. Some others we're still waiting. Carl, good to see you again. How's life?
Life's been treating me well, Dave. How have you been?
Been good on our end, thanks. This is where we need to do like a rewind to see how prophetic you are looking into the future compared to what we had last time. There were so many different trends you were following at that time. Let's be honest, in all immodesty on your side, you pretty accurately predicted where things were headed.
Uh, well, if you'll give me that, I guess maybe I'll take it.
Okay.
Yeah, we're still facing some headwinds in the permanent crop sector generally,
Sure.
I guess. But almonds, we're in a pretty good spot. We're at a profitable space at the farm gate. Walnuts, tougher economics still. We still got some larger crops. Wine grapes, I think we left that as a question mark, right? And
I think you're right.
we could probably still leave that as a question mark today, unfortunately. You know, learned a lot since the last time we talked, but just really big social changes still unfolding in front of us. And I don't know, been doing more with pistachios. We've had some good pistachio years since we've talked. This year is looking to be a really interesting one. So
All right,
really
let's deep dive these. You hit our big four here. So let's go almond. So last we talked, you talked about the need for you're gonna have to pull out of some of these acres, right? And we did see some of that, right?
we did actually. I believe this was the first year in quite some time that bearing acres in the almond industry have actually gone down. So, crop levels have steadily kind of lessened as well. So, that 3 billion pound crop we had a little while ago looks like it could now be something of the past. I don't know that we have another 3 billion pound almond crop in front of us. So some stabilization, at least from the supply side.
So what did you see in that transition as some of those acres are coming out? Well, that's always a difficult process, right? So how did that work?
Um, well, we might have talked about it last time. I think there's a couple different primary factors driving it. You have just farm gate economics, driving, you know, lack of replanting, right? Where you've got these older age orchards that are just aging out, and landowners are either
Hmm.
deciding to defer redevelopment or just go into alternative crops, maybe row crops or a different tree nut. And then you've got water restrictions with groundwater specifically in the San Joaquin Valley that are just not going to make it feasible to redevelop those older orchards. So where we had a big stack of non-bearing acres, following these older orchards before, that just isn't the case anymore.
What's the impact on price?
Well, stable to upward, which, the way things have been for the last 5 years, we'll take that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, if
Yeah,
you're able to stick in there, you're finally maybe seeing some fruits of the labor here and of the patience really to survive your way through this.
absolutely. And I think especially those that have been able to tighten their belts through those really tough times, be disciplined you're efficient enough of an operator that your break-even cost per pound of production, you reduce that during those really hard times, and now you're really able to take advantage of the better pricing now, at least,
Okay,
despite.
so in my windup, I'm puffing up your ego, but we do need to
No,
talk about walnuts. So
yeah.
maybe your prediction on walnuts is not quite yet. Is that
Yeah.
fair?
Yeah. I've got to say, I was expecting mo bearing acreage to decrease more than
Hmm.
it has. Um, and we had a pretty big California walnut crop last year. Um, so a theory, and I don't know that I have a way to substantiate this, but I think there might even be a little bit of a variable component of production with walnuts, where you've got hobby acres or orchards where people have a homestead and
Hmm.
you've got 20, 30 acres and oh, what the heck, prices seem good enough this year. I think I'll harvest that. I think there's probably a component of production that comes in as prices were recovering, where, you know, custom harvesters were driving around and saying, "Hey, can I harvest this for you?" And guys are going, "Yeah, what the heck?"
Uh-huh.
That probably contributed. And then, it's an alternate bearing crop too. So we probably also had better pricing at a down year. And then with that up year, we had a big upswing that took it down. So we don't seem to be able to tolerate much variance in that production, and we haven't settled into where the market wants to be yet, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, sure. So what will it take then for the pullback by the growers here that you thought the industry is going to have to go through? Why hasn't that happened yet?
Well, we're an optimistic bunch, aren't we? I
Sure,
mean,
sure. That's fair.
just hang on for another year.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know, low prices cure low prices. So there are a lot of older orchards out there still with older out of favor varieties too. The industry seems to be consolidating more and more to the Chandler variety in California. So I think just pure economics are going to drive that. You've got water really driving almonds and pistachios in the San Joaquin Valley. I don't think you have the same water constraints on walnuts. So we're going to have to wait for the economics to just balance it out.
I'll bring this up from time to time since I always look at these things as the outsider, not growing up in the industry, that one of the things that I selfishly wish that we could figure out is we have all of these producers in so many different industries that are phenomenal at growing, right? And then we end up with this oversupply. And we have people in 50 states who would love to have this stuff. It's just too bad we can't improve a system enough to where growers meet the hungry consumers in some form better than we do now. You know what I mean? I know that's a panacea vision of life, and but it just seems like we've got the people who can do it. We got a bunch of hungry people. There's got to be a way, a better way to connect all these.
Yeah. Um, I tell you what, if you figure it out, give me a call.
But it's weird, like we're talking about walnuts, right? Like, and literally everything we talk about this week is going to be healthy stuff. I appreciate wine grapes. Maybe you got to be, you can't go too far on that. You can't drink your body weight every day or something. But like the rest of the nut stuff, like these are like mostly superfoods. So they're
Mhm.
super healthy, super nutritious. You start looking at protein, everything else that these things provide. It's just too bad we can't. I don't know how it happens in a free market society, but it just seems like there's got to be some way that you can connect better than we do to support both ends.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the market's still telling us we're producing too much, though. And walnuts are an interesting one. Unlike other superfood nuts that we produce in California, uh, walnuts can be produced in large scale in a lot of other countries
Yeah.
around the world. And so I think there's faster supply responses to prices that you wouldn't get to almonds or pistachios. So it's just it's a different nut, pun intended,
Yeah.
uh, than the other two. But I don't know. I think we're closer to finding balance, and it's for our own operations. We've settled into an efficient mode of operation to where it still works. Maybe it's not quite what we were hoping for these days, but we're able to at least make it work for covering the variable costs of the operations.
And
While the
especially when it comes to walnuts, is that global competition, is that really what's stymieing us right now for the US production side? We just can't export our way out of this oversupply.
Yeah, we definitely can't export our way out of it. I mean, I don't want to get over my skis and
I do every week, man.
the ins and outs of how all these global markets function. Well, you've talked to Cody on our side before. He's the mastermind. He can tell you a whole bunch more about
We'll get
how.
Cody Dahl scheduled so we can do a PS of this conversation.
Yeah, that's right. Um, but yeah, I mean that how about we'll stop it at that from my end. We can't export our way out of it,
Okay, fair
unfortunately.
enough. All right, now you already teased ahead to the nut that is my personal and probably family addiction, pistachios. I can say comfortably that I eat my body weight in pistachios yearly, probably far beyond that as well. What's the health of that industry? You got to say healthy, man, because I need my supply. But
Yeah,
there's,
we're
I mean, it's got some question marks now, right?
a lot of well, yeah, some interesting question marks. I think if you talk to a lot of pistachio folks 5 years ago, the question mark was, how are we going to sell all these pistachios?
Yeah.
We're going to have a 2 billion pound crop. There's all these non-bearing acres. Is the world really going to eat all these pistachios? And we just had our largest crop, I think, ever last year. And we moved pricing up year over year to the farm gate. Um, so that was really confidence inspiring for the growers. We still look at it from a long-term supply, I guess, outlook that water is really going to constrain pistachios in California in the long run. I guess they were the last nut to really come on board in the California production system. So if you think about, picking your land in these permanent crop operating systems, I don't know if an afterthought is fair, but when you're picking your land and your irrigation districts and everything, it's like, okay, well, I need somewhere to put these pistachios now. I've already got my almonds and my walnuts.
Hmm.
So a lot of pistachios are in lands that are not so water secure, especially with regards to groundwater. So I think there's a water externality that just sort of, puts a cap on that production that keeps us from running out in front of ourselves. And in the long run, that's good, right? I mean, there's going to be some individual pain for certain folks maybe that got in at the wrong time in the wrong place. And I mean, that's too bad. But for those that were diligent, disciplined, and made those right investments, it's going to be very fruitful for sure.
What do you attribute to the increased consumer demand, especially just for pistachios? Is it better marketing? Is it partially the protein craze, this desire to find more healthy alternatives? What do you see behind it? Is it a combination?
Combination, but I mean, you have to give it to the marketing. Super Bowl ads,
Mm.
just I mean, Wonderful does a great job. So does APG. They're just phenomenal at marketing pistachios globally. So they've done great for us. And then obviously plant-based protein interest has carried us too.
Okay, you talked about wine grapes. I have been fascinated by that industry for a while now. As a dude who basically just grew up on beer and didn't even discover wine until women introduced to me, And at some point, you want to look a little more sophisticated out on a date, right? And you're like, yeah, sure, red, white, I don't know, it's all taste, I don't know anything about it, whatever. Then you get into adulthood and you realize it's far more nuanced and everything else. But this sort of generational thing that we're seeing with the 20 somethings in particular, that as they come of drinking age and stay that first decade or whatever, this what looks like, I think, globally, and I might be out of my skis on this, I don't know if it's just the States or beyond, but the suppressed demand here. I mean, we talked a little bit about this when we connected the last time, but there's no evidence that this is changing, right? Like demand hasn't picked back up for the younger consumers, right?
It hasn't. I think you're right. It's global, and California, I believe, now has almost 100,000 acres less wine grapes in the ground than we did in
Mm,
2018, kind of at the peak. Last year, we
wow.
pulled 40 some odd thousand acres out, and we're still chasing demand down. Bulk wine inventory, I think, is the highest it's ever been. So that's really fascinating. A couple of years ago when we were talking, the more premium wine folks were probably thinking that they were going to be insulated from this, and they're learning that they're also not.
Hmm.
You know, it's everywhere. So GLP-1s, I don't know how much of a thing that was last time we were talking.
True. Yeah,
Yeah,
just kind of on the beginning edge, maybe.
yeah, that seems to be also fundamentally changing consumer behavior with regards to alcohol as well. So, what's this going to look like in 5 years? Um, I don't know. Um, I remember in the 90s that it was pretty rough in the wine grape space and things were overplanted, but it was a like real quick pullback, and then everything seemed to just bounce right back. Like, oh, whoops, we overdid it. We pulled too many wine grapes out. So let's just plant them again. And, it seemed like, the big wineries were handing out planting contracts. Hey,
Hmm.
we need some Chardonnay. I'll give you a contract if you plant them for me. And we're definitely not getting those calls yet. So we've been doing some pretty interesting things in the field, having to make, tough calls. Do you cut cash burns on vineyards and just pull them out? Do you have better, more high-end vineyards that are probably viable for high-value contracts, hopefully in the near term? And we're doing what we call some mothballing, where we're basically just pruning them back really hard and cutting them back from cropping for a couple of years so that we don't have as much of an economic spend on them, but we're preserving, the trellis and the biological aspect of them. But big question marks still.
How frequently is that happening? Just the idea to pull back to essentially just hit the pause button for a couple of years. How common is that?
Think 2026 was the big year for mothballing to go in, driving up and down the highways. You didn't really notice it much, but now just, out of the corner of your eye, oh, look, they did that too this year. Oh, yep, you see it over there. So I couldn't give you a number of acres, but that's been quite common. Because you go into a higher end area, the north coast of California or Napa, it's going to cost you 40 or 50,000 bucks an acre to even just put the trellis back in for that vineyard if you take it
Hmm.
out. So it's worth at least hitting the pause button if you can manage for a while. But I think those will also be some interesting supply characteristics, right, in the market that I don't recall there being much of the last time we went through this. I think a lot more bulldoze activities went on versus mothballing.
Hmm.
So we might have a little bit quicker of a supply rebound response whenever we figure out, where this equilibrium is. I mean, eventually we're going to pull back too hard. It seems like we always do. in this space, right? It just that's the momentum carries it, and you go past the mark. So will you have enough mothball vineyards that you don't need any replanting, or what will that look like? That'll be an interesting one to see.
Is there any way to characterize the mindset here? Are these folks who think that demand is going to eventually come back up some, or are they thinking that they're going to pause, hoping the other guy's going to pull out altogether?
I think you have both camps in there. You probably also have opportunistic investors looking at places like Napa going, oh my gosh, Napa's half off.
Yeah.
I can buy Napa real estate for close to half of what I could 5 years ago.
Hmm.
If I can hold this and afford the hold on it, then why would I not?
Uh-huh.
So you've got that too. And if it happens to come with the vineyard without a contract, what do you do with the vineyard? Well, those are decisions you've got to make. So do you pull it out? Do you mothball it, pre-develop it? Yeah. So lots of different moving parts going on in the wine
Okay,
space.
I already tried to guide you past your comfort level. What's your gut on, particularly with wine? Do you think that this is sort of a moment in time kind of thing with consumer behavior just altering, which we've gone through a lot of since COVID, right? We've seen all kinds of things shake around
Yeah.
all over the place. Or do you think that the industry is going to have to provide different forms of wine, less sugar, less calorie? Who knows, man? Protein infused or something crazy? I don't know, but maybe that's not crazy. Maybe that exists already. Um, do you have any sense of maybe the industry view on this, or does this have to be a permanent change where people just aren't going to drink the way they used to?
It feels different. I don't know if I definitely can't speak for the industry. I guess my own opinion is the consumers telling you they don't want what you're offering now.
Hmm.
So the nut to crack is, well, what do they want? You know, for whatever reason, the non-alcoholic beer space seems to have been fairly successful. Um, you don't really see that in wine, for whatever reason. So yeah, is it sort of different spins on wine? I don't know. Some of it too that fascinates me is just the price point. There's no more Thunderbird or $2 Chuck
Yeah,
or any of that anymore. And
yeah,
so in all of the sort of just inflationary pressures that are on your average American household, how many people are reaching for a $14 a bottle table wine?
sure.
Um, that's probably part of the problem too. So costs have elevated at the farm gate and at the winery, but can you get back to a $5 bottle of wine that people want to drink? That might help get you back on the people's dinner tables. So, but something's obviously got to change because what we're doing right now as an industry is not selling wine.
You've mentioned several times throughout this conversation already water. And I know that this is a topic that you have spent a number of years in that field. So you understand it. Where are we right now? What are you experiencing?
Um, we're starting to be at that point where the rubber meets the road with implementation. Uh,
Hmm.
I had an interesting conversation this morning with someone about a an area where an agency is trying to enforce pumping restrictions, um, and what they're learning about, the level of sophistication or the level of regard for law and order, and how that affects, you know, how well you can actually implement an order or a rule. If your neighbors sort of respect this concept and the idea that we all need to work together, okay, now we can only pump 1 acre-foot per acre, and we're going to self-police. Well, that's one thing, but if you decree 1 acre-foot is all you can pump, it's like, oh crap, how do we stop a bunch of cowboys from pumping two or three?
Yep. Yep.
Um, and so it's interesting to watch and be a part of. The Department of Water Resources is working on a few best management practices for some of the, six management criteria in Sigma. Subsidence has been a big one that folks are talking about right now. Think maybe some creative language and math drove them to write some more standardized language about how that's accounted for in the groundwater sustainability plans. So, just a lot of uh, really hard, like this is where we are now type situations. We can't, if we set a minimum threshold of water levels can't exceed, this floor, and now they're dropping below here. Well, what are you going to do about it? And we're seeing some minimum thresholds be dropped below. We're seeing subsidence continue in certain areas. So, uh, water pumping restrictions are actually starting to be put in place, which what are we now? More than 10 years past the passing of the legislation.
Yeah.
So, it feels like, wow, that was quick, but I don't know, a decade.
Yeah.
And
That's
finally
not
here
great.
we're at actual consequences.
The one thing that I've really struggled to understand with all of this is that really, really generically speaking, if you have too many people living in an area that the resources around can't support, then some of those people need to move elsewhere, right? I know it's not that easy, but just generically speaking. But because this greater region produces so many critical crops that are pretty much localized to that area, we're not going to all of a sudden, I'm in Iowa, we're not going to all of a sudden become the new pistachio capital of the world, right? Like there are just certain things you just can't do geographically. So that's the thing that I really struggle with. If water scarcity is going to be to continue to be a strain, how what are we going to have to do? Or are we eventually just not going to be able to produce some of these crops and we're going to have to be more dependent globally?
Yeah, well, unless there's significant innovation to produce those crops with a smaller amount of water per unit of production, right? We're going to have to produce those in other regions. Either, I know there's some folks trying pistachios, I think in Arizona, and I even heard of a farm, I think in New Mexico or Texas. But largely, I think the premier production region is still going to be California. So I think that just puts a cap on what California can produce. Because at I think the passing of the signal legislation in California, we were over pumping about 2 million acre feet per acre of groundwater annually. And that's no small amount of
For
water.
sure. Yeah,
It's not something you can continue to do. And, problem is that it doesn't just affect the groundwater under your farm. That affects, shared infrastructure. That affects the canals that send water from the Sacramento Bay Delta down to LA and 30 plus million people down there,
hmm
drinking water for municipalities. So, yeah, I mean, as much as we love producing these crops, I think you have to find that limit where you're not causing harm to the rest of the shared infrastructure with other people. And that's
for
just the
sure.
reality of it.
For sure. Your family's still involved in farming.
Oh, yeah.
How's that going?
Oh, real well. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, since this has been more of a down cycle economically, I definitely get a rib from dad every once in a while. See, son, I told you not to farm.
And I should have led up with this. Remind everybody what you're into.
What I'm
Yeah,
into?
what you're farming. Yeah,
Oh, so permanent crops in California and Washington. So tree nuts and wine grapes in California, and then tree fruit in Central Washington. And that's kind of been a family tradition now for a few generations.
and you're sticking with it.
Sticking with it. Yep. No, of all things, I definitely do not wake up in the morning and think, boy, I don't know if I made the right choice. That's never a
Mm,
thought that crosses my mind.
that's awesome. What keeps you optimistic? I mean, you just laid out a gazillion challenges during this half-hour conversation. Are you just
I,
an optimistic guy because by nature any farmer has to be?
well, I'm sure that's got to be something, right? But we've still have the demand we talked about for pistachios, for almonds. I mean, those have been the bread and butter crops my whole life. And even with the challenges, you've got externalities that are going to keep us from overproducing. And I think the same externalities we're dealing with water and climate, they exist in the other producing regions around the world too. So it's not like Spain's going to take over and, that's where all the supply is coming from or something. Um, so you've got a global demand for a valuable product, and it's just like this really opportunistic time, especially now. I don't know, it's especially exciting now because land values have contracted with these lower farm gate prices to a point where your entry opportunity is so much more attractive. So, getting back in, you've got more clarity being further down the road with Sigma. You've got lower land prices. I mean, having grown up in California, operated here my whole life, it's just like this window of opportunity that the glass is so much clearer now, right? And that's really exciting. So, for those clients that want to be opportunistic about this, I can't even describe how exciting it is.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Carl, good to catch up with you. Thank you so much for the conversation. Good to see you again.
absolutely. Great to see you again too, Dave.
Hey, fun fact, as you might guess, with a guy named Carl the Third, there were two Carls before him, and they all went to Cal Poly and they all got ag business degrees. You can learn a lot of facts like that if you subscribe to our weekly American Farmland Owner newsletter. It's free and it's the place where landowners get their news. You can check it out now at AmericanFarmlandOwner.com. Thanks for joining us here on the podcast, and thanks for caring about the future of our farmers.